Welcome to the Kapital News. I am your host, Alex Karitis. Today is October 29th, 2019. Thank you so much for joining me. Today is basically going to be traveling around the globe because there's so many stories to get to today. The markets were relatively flat in anticipation of Jay Powell's speech tomorrow at a press conference following the conclusion of the Federal Open Market Committee. So we're going to talk about the markets. CEO of Boeing, Dennis Muilenburg, testified today before a Senate panel. We'll talk about some of those specifics. Further updates to Brexit. Once again, this is being kicked further and further down the road. No surprise to us here at the Kapital News. It is shocking. It is, again, a slap in the face to the institution of democracy. That's my biggest concern here. I'll give you those details. A big, quote-unquote, big star witness testified before a House panel behind closed doors in the Impeachment Inquiry. Army Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman. We'll talk about this because is this the first key witness that has firsthand knowledge of the phone call between President Trump and President Zelensky of the Ukraine? It appears so, and we're going to talk about that because the politics are now starting to heat up. You thought it was bad before, now it's starting to heat up a little bit further. Everybody's getting siloed in. Democrats are in their corner. Republicans are in their corner. Not that they were ever really reaching across the aisle, but now they're going to start getting in deeper into their respective corners. U.S.-China trade war update. Can't get away from that. There always has to be something going on there. Thunder Thumb's tweeting as we predicted because this is Fed week, so he has to make a comment. We're going to talk about that. And then these global protests. There's a little bit of further fracturing, but some of these protesters are starting to get their way, and we're going to talk about that as well. But first, to the market news so we can get that out of the way. The S&P was down 2.5 points. The Dow gave back 19. The NASDAQ lost 49 points for the day, and the Russell 2000 bucked the trend and gained 5 additional points for the day. The Dow Jones Transports gave back 0.2%. Meanwhile, the New York Stock Exchange gained 0.2%. Oil relatively unchanged as well. WTI at $55.25 per barrel. Brent, the international metric, is at $61.50. Precious metals took another hit today. Gold is now at $1,486 an ounce, losing about $6 from yesterday's podcast. And silver is down slightly, trading at $17.80. U.S. 10-year Treasury, relatively unchanged from yesterday's podcast, yielding 1.84%. And the VIX, slightly up, ever so slightly, only a few pennies, and is now trading at $13.20. This is sort of par for the course before a Fed meeting. Yesterday, obviously, we saw a little bit more of a rally, stocks making all-time highs on the S&P 500. Again, making an all-time high today in intraday trading, but obviously closed down for the day 2.5 points. The NASDAQ not far behind, the Dow not far behind. Still a lot of catching up to do with the small caps and the mid caps. Lot to behold here. For all intents and purposes, the market should have priced in by now what the Federal Reserve is going to do. The Federal Reserve is likely to cut interest rates by at least 25 basis points tomorrow. The markets are predicting this with the probability of 94, 96%. So the Fed is not going to come out and disappoint markets. They're just not going to do it, especially at the end of the year. They want to make sure that there is not a repeat of last year insofar as they have anything to do about it. If they were to say, no, we're just going to do another wait and see until December or till the beginning of next year, we think we're good right now, markets are likely to sell off drastically. And they don't want to be the ones with all of the blame on their shoulders because Thunder Thumbs will blame them regardless. But he would definitely turn up the volume on them if they don't continue cutting rates. And actually, Donald Trump came out again and is now saying, look what's going on in Europe. Look what's going on in Japan. They have negative interest rates, so we have to follow them. I thought Donald Trump was supposed to be the guy who sort of bucked all of these trends and said, no, we're not following Europe. We're not following Asia. We do what we have to do here in the United States. We're the leaders of the free world. We're the leaders of the entire world, whether it's the free world or otherwise. We're the leaders. We're the dominant power. We're not supposed to be socialists, yet he wants to follow the socialist policies of Europe. None of this makes any sense until and unless you understand that Donald Trump wants this stock market to go higher at any cost. I don't want this stock market to go higher at any cost. I want it to go higher on stronger fundamental economics, on better earnings, on better revenues, on corporations managing their businesses better, offering better products to us, the customers. I don't want this because the Federal Reserve is going to print more money. I don't want higher stock prices because we're going into negative interest rate territory. I don't want that, and neither should you, because none of us are going to be able to predict the timing as to when all of this crashes. This is a house of cards built on a foundation of sand. Okay, we can give you a million analogies here in little sayings as to how weak this economy, how weak the foundation of this economy is built on. When's it going to end? I don't know. And that's one of the scariest things, because this is not steady as she goes. This is put the pedal to the metal and juice these markets. Continue to hit Wall Street and the stock market with everything we got. Lower interest rates, negative interest rates, quantitative easing from the European Central Bank. The Bank of Japan is getting ready to intervene once again. They never really stopped. And now you have $60 billion per month, courtesy of the Federal Reserve. But we're not supposed to call it QE. And we also have overnight bailouts on a nightly basis, with the Federal Reserve having to intervene, which they have not had to do since the Great Recession. So everything is fantastic. Nothing to see here, folks. Again, we have never ruled out here at the Capital News the potential and the possibility of a melt-up in the stock market, a blow-off top. I think it can be argued reasonably that since Donald Trump has been president, what we have witnessed over the course of 3 years has been a melt-up and a blow-off top with not a little, but a decent foreshock that came to us last year in the fourth quarter, with the major indexes falling about 20%. Now, of course, over the past year and a half, 2 years, we've been in a very, not a tight trading range, but in a trading range nevertheless. So despite the fact that Donald Trump wants to claim that markets are at all-time highs, this, that, and the other, from where we were for the past 2 years, we're relatively flat. So to push this market up even further by artificial means, to me, is a crime. And again, another thing that really disappoints me with Donald Trump, because I voted for the guy. Highly disappointed with his actions. Highly disappointed with a lot of his policies. Some of his policies I applaud him on, you know this. But these are the big ones. And when he was running for president saying, look, what the Federal Reserve is doing is a crime. They're blowing bubbles. The markets are in bubble territory. The economy is fake. It's bloated because of what the Obama administration was doing with Congress, trillion-dollar deficits, money printing. Now that's exactly what Donald Trump has. We have a trillion-dollar deficit, not even discussed. We have now the president, well, he's been claiming and been hammering for lower interest rates. He's getting them, and he's been calling for quantitative easing. Well, he's got it. So now the only thing that he can complain that the Federal Reserve hasn't done is that they haven't followed Europe and Japan and some other countries into negative interest rate territory. And nobody asks him any questions. What does this mean for me, sir? What does this mean for middle America? What does this mean if I have some money in a checking account or a savings account? Am I going to earn interest, or am I going to have to pay the bank interest? You're going to have to pay the bank. That's how that works. Well, what happens if I want to invest and I want to buy U.S. Treasuries and there's a negative yield? Am I going to receive a coupon, or am I going to have to pay the government the coupon? You're going to have to pay the government the coupon. He doesn't talk about this. And people don't understand this because nobody has a conversation with you about it. And depending on what network you listen to, I mean, they might be all over Donald Trump and saying, this is fantastic, everything's fine. You watch a lot of people on Fox Business, what Donald Trump's doing, he can do no wrong. Only a few years ago when it was Obama it was really 7 years ago when he had trillion-dollar deficits, 2012, but nevertheless, you still had sizable deficits. You had these same folks complaining that this was a crime against humanity, that this was reason to kick Obama out and the Democrats out. Now Donald Trump's in there trillion deficit. No problem. That's fine. He's our guy. Can make no mistake. Well, he's spending it on what we want. So there's no problem. Well, then you reach into your pocket and you pay my share. How about you do that? Because I don't want to pay it. I don't vote for these things. This isn't what I asked for. This isn't what I voted for. So I shouldn't have to pay for all this nonsense. But if you're fine with it, good. Good for you. Reach deeper into your pocket and pay my share. Believe me, I won't be upset. But I don't think that's going to happen. So everybody wants to get siloed in, creates further divisiveness, and that's exactly what's taking place here. So with Boeing, we have Boeing stock up 2.4% today. Apparently the markets like what they heard from Boeing CEO Dennis Muilenburg before the Senate committee in which he testified today. I caught most of it. Not live, but afterwards. I watched some of it because I knew he was going to be testifying, and we have done a number of podcasts focused heavily on Boeing. And this is a major U.S. corporation. It is a major component of the Dow Jones Industrial Average. Huge manufacturer. The largest U.S. exporter. So if this problem continues with the 737 MAX airline, this is going to have ripple effects across the country. We're already seeing that Airbus, Boeing's main competitor, really there's only two major airplane companies that exist in the world, Boeing here in the United States and Airbus in Europe. We're starting to see that Airbus is getting a lot more orders. They just picked up, I believe it was a $30 billion deal out of India. I think one of their airlines has just put in a huge order for Airbus airplanes. So that's a big hit against Boeing because that wasn't even like a 50-50 split. We'll get some Airbus, some Boeing, and we'll split it. Nope, all to Airbus. So that's not good as we wait and see what Boeing is doing to rectify the issue. And again, as how we understand it to be at this juncture, is this is not a structural issue with the plane. The plane has been airborne for a few years now, with obviously many, many successful flights, but we've had two that have crashed within 5 months of each other. So that raises a lot of eyebrows. That raises huge amounts of concern because all of those people died. All 300 and near 50 of them passed away. So that is not good. And what we understand this to be is this is a sensor issue and this is a software issue and a lack of pilot training issue. Now the question becomes, was Boeing aware of this? And did they prioritize revenue and profits and getting this plane to market so they could compete with Airbus? Did they put those things ahead of safety? Clearly, what the market thinks of the testimony today, nope, everything seems to be okay. Everything's on path to get these airplanes back in operation. Major U.S. airlines are expecting this plane to be operational come the first quarter of next year. I'm not so certain because now you have Congress heavily involved in this and Congress takes its good old time. I'm thinking at best case scenario is the second quarter of next year, and that assumes that there was no funny business. But if there is more information that comes to light that Boeing did know that this could be a serious problem and pushed it under the rug and just said, well, yeah, let's cross our fingers on this one because we got to start making money here, then you're going to see a big reversal. You're going to see a lack of trust come through on this. And this is only on the U.S. side, folks. There are still investigations taking place across the world with those respective regulatory agencies conducting their own investigations to determine when this airplane can become operational again, if they decide that that's the case. So there's a lot of uncertainty. We hope that this is rectified. This is a major U.S. company. I honestly believe, as I have stated in previous podcasts, that if Boeing should suffer significantly or go down, this will be like a Lehman Brothers-like event that we witnessed in 2008 that kick-started the Great Recession, the financial crisis. This will be a manufacturing crisis that will spread through the economy because of all of the interconnectedness of many, many industries that Boeing relies on, and that those respective industries heavily rely on Boeing as well. So understand the interconnectedness of it all. Let's hope that the engineers and the leadership that exists within Boeing can get through this, and we can make these airplanes as safe as ever. So we'll keep you updated on that. Brexit. boy, oh boy, we are going to have a vote, a general election vote on December 12th. Easy to remember, 12/12. 12/12, there will be a general election in the UK, and the European Union has granted a Brexit extension to January 31st of 2020. So what was supposed to be a hard deadline tomorrow, or I'm sorry, in 2 days, the 31st, Halloween, trick or treat, of course, is now no longer in play. No longer the case. First time it was back in March. Nope. Let's give them an extension. Let's make it Halloween. We're here. Got a deal? Nope. Let's extend it further. Give them another few months to the end of January. What do you think is going to happen at the end of January? We'll hold off our opinion and analysis on that. We'll just wait and see what happens. But like I have been doing here for the past several months, really between March and now, I've been laying low on this because nothing's happening. Can keeps getting kicked further and further down the road. This is a slap in the face to the institution of democracy. Now, it's going to be interesting to see if Nigel Farage, pretty much the father of Brexit, if he should stand in this election, because he was the founder of the UKIP party, UKIP, UK Independence Party. He has then removed himself from that party and started recently the Brexit Party, if you remember back in the summer when there was the European parliamentary elections, and he won a majority of the seats in the UK, and they've taken a lot of similar-minded people to the European Union Parliament to sort of shake heads and rattle the cages there. So will he stand in these coming elections? That'll be quite interesting if he does, because chances are he would win a seat in Parliament, and I'm sure he would be quite the controversial voice in the House of Commons as well. So we'll keep you updated on that. I hope the man does stand in it, because he is sort of the Ron Paul of the UK, if you will. Ron Paul was a personal political hero of mine. Really realizing that, you're not the lone voice out there when you hear somebody like a Ron Paul, retired congressman from Texas, former physician, all that stuff, presidential candidate. When you have somebody out there like that and you say, oh my goodness, thank God there's somebody who agrees with me or believes similar things that I do. Of course, this country is not prepared for that type of thinking. That would take us back to the Constitution, and we are so far removed from it, people don't understand it. But nevertheless, we're still clinging on to some hope that maybe, just maybe, we'll get back to our roots and we can restore this country to how it's supposed to be. So that's Brexit, further kicking the can down the road, a complete lack of leadership. The British people have to start rioting, as far as I'm concerned. Peaceful protest. Maybe I should say that better. They should be peaceful and they should be protests. Let's not call it rioting. I guess rioting can sort of invoke something of violence. I don't want violence. We want peace and prosperity here. But they're going to have to start protesting, because this is nonsense. They voted 3 years ago. This is what they wanted. If it's not easy, too bad. It's what you voted for. That's how it works. Leave. If you think it was terrible, try to get back in. That's what you got to do. But you got to leave. You voted for divorce, you leave the house. That's all I can tell you. On the U.S.-China trade front, yesterday we were ahead of schedule. Now you have officials from the White House. It's being reported that, maybe not so, folks. Maybe not so. Who's surprised? Raise your hand. If you pay attention to this podcast, you better not be raising your hand. You should not be surprised by this. We are now told that, the deal's still going forward, it appears anyway, but it might not be ready for a signing ceremony in Chile next month. Really, in a few weeks. The president can't help himself. It's just one exaggeration. It's one lie. It's one more market manipulation after the other. He wanted to see the market make all-time highs because he was watching TV, and he wanted to sit in front of TV and tweet to everybody that the S&P 500 made an all-time high. So we're ahead of schedule with the Chinese trade talks. Market rallies on the news, hits all-time highs. He tweets, market made an all-time high. And now we're starting to get maybe the truth from other advisors and officials within the White House saying, we're still on track, but not ahead of schedule. And in fact, if they're not ready to sign this thing in Chile, they're behind schedule. So go figure. This was another thing. I was having a conversation the other day in regards to that al-Baghdadi, I guess you could say raid, where he blew himself up. And President Trump's subsequent speech And like, well, yeah, he's claiming that this guy was crying like a kid. He was a coward, whimpering like a dog, this, that, and the other. And I said, yeah, I'm not so sure about that. He said, well, it's on tape. He said it was on tape. And I said, yeah, I'm not sure about that. Unless we see the tape, I'm not sure about that. And I don't know if this White House will release the tape. Not that I'm arguing that they should, but I said, yeah, I don't trust the president that was true until and unless we see the tape. And now you have several officials, of course not being named, but it's several officials it's being reported that said we don't know where the president came up with the fact that al-Baghdadi was crying and whimpering in a corner of the tunnel where he blew himself up. So again, who do you believe? I mean, I'm not believing the president because this is what he does. He lies and he exaggerates because he doesn't care. He doesn't care. But guess who should? You should care because he's representing us. Do you want to be viewed as a liar? I don't. Now, you could say this is par for the course. Other presidents have lied. There's no question about it. But wasn't this guy supposed to be different? Wasn't he supposed to shake things up in Washington, D.C.? Wasn't he supposed to drain the swamp? Well, how can that be if you have $1 trillion deficits and nothing to show for it? Nothing. You have nothing to show for it. How can that be if we're still involved with these endless wars? How can that be when the military-industrial complex gets $2 trillion? How can that be when the largest banks in this country are continuing to make record profits? Meanwhile, smaller banks and mid-sized banks are continuing to suffer. You know what I mean? And then it's all cherry-picking of the data. Whatever looks good is congratulatory to the president. He'll do that himself. And if it's not good news, it's somebody else's fault. The Democrats, Republicans who are never Trumpers, or it's the Federal Reserve or some combination thereof. So again, poor leadership. I'm highly disappointed in a lot of the actions undertaken by this president and the administration. So, I mean, pick your poison. I guess you're going to vote for who you want to vote for, but at least be honest with yourself when you go through this, please. On the global protest front, you have Lebanon continuing their protest. However, they scored a victory with the Lebanese prime minister resigning his post, although this is going to perhaps leave a vacuum in Lebanon, but they are not giving up with their protests. They want basically the entire parliament out. They want their money back. Wow, doesn't that sound familiar? Maybe I should be in Lebanon. I want my money back too, and I want all these people voted out or kicked out. But again, here in the United States, we don't do this. There's no protests here in the United States because you have Instagram and your Facebook account, and you got your Twitter feed, and we are awash with Prozac and Xanax and Valium and alcohol stores all over the place, and marijuana plants going up all over the place, and heroin is readily available. Fentanyl is readily available. So we have the pick of our poison here, and we just sort of march along as the zombies that we are in this country. Football's on 4 days a week, so we don't have to worry about protesting. Everything's A-OK. Don't worry about trillion-dollar deficits. Don't worry about negative interest rates coming to a theater near you. Just continue in your stupor, and everything will be A-OK. So that's not good, but at least a score for the people of Lebanon that the prime minister has resigned. Let's see if they can get rid of their corrupt politicians as well. We wish them luck. Same thing with Chile. These protests continue. However, the protesters scored somewhat of a victory there as well because they were demanding change within their government. And we now have the government removing several members of its cabinet. So we'll see who they install there, if that sort of calms the tension in Chile. But don't forget, the signing ceremony between Thunder Thumbs and President Xi is supposed to take place in Chile. Will that be a safe environment for not only these world leaders, but several other world leaders to go to Chile to even have this summit? So we'll keep you posted on that. And it's not the end of everything, because you still have other protests taking place in Hong Kong and in Iraq. They're still not happy in Egypt and all over the world. Remember, folks, this is not coincidental. This is a underlying shift that is taking place in this world. This is historic. I believe this is historic. These are cracks in the foundation. This is economic related. There's no doubt about it. Obviously, politics and economics are very much so joined together, but this is a collapse of many, many economic systems. And the weak are always going to feel those effects first, and that's exactly what we're seeing. These are poor countries with the exception of Hong Kong, but Hong Kong is so hit with debt and money printing and the effects of U.S. money printing and Chinese money printing. It's a double whammy, the most expensive real estate in the world. That's why these people are upset. They can't afford to live. And then they're concerned that they are going to fall under the thumb of the Chinese Communist Party. So you can't blame them for protesting to the degree and the extent of which they had. I think we're going on, the fourth or fifth month here, and there's no end in sight. So good for those people. These are the cracks in the foundation. It's only a matter of time before it makes its way to more developed countries, Japan, Australia, Canada, Mexico to a degree, United States, Europe. I mean, it's coming. Believe me when I tell you this is not going to end well. And money printing is not the solution. In fact, it's been the problem, and it's only going to cause more problems. I wish people would wake up to this fact. I'm going to talk about it here every day because I know what the problem is, and I'm laser focused. And I'm not going to go down multiple rabbit holes. This is not CNN. This is not MSNBC. This is not Fox News. This is the Kapital News, and I'm laser focused. This isn't about catering to the left or catering to the right. I try to discover the truth as much as I can, and it's very, very difficult to do. And another area where it's going to be very, very difficult to discover the truth is in the impeachment inquiry, with Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman testifying today that he was a first-hand witness to the call between President Trump and President Zelensky of Ukraine, and saying that he had raised multiple concerns on multiple occasions with this phone call, that he did not like the fact that the president was bringing up a political opponent and basically singling out an American citizen. I have concerns over this as well. The question becomes, and this is something that's going to have to be asked and answered during this impeachment process, is does this rise to an impeachable offense in and of itself? At the beginning of all of this, I stated that, in my opinion, it did not, but I said it was definitely worthy of an investigation. There are things that have been leaked out in regards to some other people's testimony, and that's the same with Alexander Vindman. I am not going to go down that road because we don't have the full story. However, he claims to be a first-hand witness. This goes in contradiction to what the White House and a lot of his supporters, the president's supporters, have been saying, because everything's been hearsay, right? It's all been second-hand, third-hand knowledge. Nobody's had first-hand knowledge. Well, this guy has first-hand knowledge. And now you have the White House and Republicans attacking the credibility of this guy who is a war hero, who is a Purple Heart recipient. And because of his ethnicity of being from Ukraine, now it's he's a spy. He's a spy. And now you have the hypocrisy coming from MSNBC and CNN, because they're coming to the defense of this guy. How dare the Republicans in the White House attack this war hero, this veteran of the United States military, this patriot? Well, you attacked General Flynn. You attacked recently Tulsi Gabbard, who still wears the uniform and is a Democrat. So, I mean, hypocrisy is thick on both sides. You can cut it with a knife. Not good. But who's surprised? You shouldn't be if you follow this podcast. But the truth is, it's getting hard to come by. It's being reported that Alexander Vindman is saying that there should be a verbatim transcript. And of course, there very well might be. But what we know now is there's not. What we discussed here, because what was released by the White House was not a verbatim word-for-word transcript. It even said it on the document. Caution, this is not a verbatim transcript. There were some, ellipses that took place in that document. The ... an ellipse. What might that mean? Well, according to what we're hearing in some of these reports, those ellipses could have been names that were stated that weren't understood by the note takers, and or a combination of voice recognition technology and also some technical jargon. And that makes sense. If there's voice recognition software that is transcribing these phone calls, it's understandable that they'll miss somebody's name or some technical jargon, because that's not going to be readily available in a dictionary, and the artificial intelligence isn't going to pick up on that. So that makes sense. Now, according to reports, Alexander Vindman said, look, I had the transcript. When it came to those ellipses, when it came to those missing names and technical jargon, I could have filled those things in. But that didn't happen. So we need the full story. Why didn't they happen? And you have a lot of people on the right. You have Laura Ingraham of Fox News, Sean Hannity of Fox News, and others, particularly on the right, saying, look, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what this guy says. It doesn't matter. Why? Because we already have the transcript. We already have the transcript. Well, that wasn't the argument before. The argument before was everything's hearsay. There are no witnesses that have firsthand knowledge, and that there was no quid pro quo. Well, just yesterday we reported that the ambassador to the EU, Ambassador Sondland, is now turning around and saying, yeah, there was a quid pro quo. That's reported by the Wall Street Journal. That's not CNN. That's not the Washington Post. That's the Wall Street Journal. Now, whether or not you agree with them, that's your business, but that's the Wall Street Journal. This is not some hit job, you could say, from a leftist paper or outlet. This is the Wall Street Journal. Typically has Donald Trump and the Republican side. Okay? Saying again, reporting that Ambassador Sondland, the U.S. ambassador to the European Union, is now saying that there was a quid pro quo, which is the argument that Donald Trump and his administration has been saying all along. There has not been a quid pro quo. Just a week or two ago, you had acting Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney come out to that little press conference in the White House saying, whoa, yeah, we do it all the time. Get used to it. A few hours later, he had to come out and say, no, I didn't mean to say that. We don't do that. There was no quid pro quo. There never was a quid pro quo. So there's a lot of unanswered questions. And for the Republicans and a lot of pundits on Fox News to come out and say, we have the transcript as if that's all there is. How do you know? You're not behind those closed-door meetings, those depositions. How do we know there weren't other phone calls? How do we know there weren't other instances of concern? I mean, wouldn't you ask some of these witnesses that question? Were you a witness to other phone calls or actions by the president that are similar to this one with the president of Ukraine? I mean, isn't that a common sense question? Because would you not want to establish some sort of fact pattern that this is what the president does, which would give legitimacy to Mick Mulvaney's statement that we do this all the time? Now, again, you can have the question, is this okay? Is this just politics? Is this what they do on a day-to-day basis? But when you go after a political opponent, when you actually single out an American citizen like Donald Trump did with Joe Biden and his son Hunter Biden, that does raise eyebrows. And to me, it does justify an investigation. Because like I've said from the very beginning, I do my best to be very consistent here, and I stick with this. If the president had previous conversations with the prior administration of Ukraine, where he stated, look, our intelligence communities here in the United States are saying that, there was some funny business going on in the 2016 elections. We have it on good authority that there was some of this nonsense coming out of Ukraine. We'd really like to work together to sort of sort out this corruption and get to the bottom of it. And maybe Joe Biden or somebody else comes up in that conversation 2 or 3 years ago. To date, we have no such phone call. We have no such statement coming from the White House or his attorneys, White House counsel, or the president's personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, on this. We have nothing. It's radio silence. But what we do have is a phone call and a transcript that says, go after Joe Biden and his son Hunter Biden in the midst of the 2020 presidential campaign. The president could have had a leg to stand on if he was just calling President Zelensky to say, hey, congratulations on your win. I just want to bring you up to speed that the United States and the Ukrainian government are working hand in hand here to root out corruption, and just so happens that Joe Biden's probably involved somehow. We have nothing like that. We just say, there's some business. I'd like you to do us a favor and look into Joe Biden. So that's not good. That's not good. This is akin to what, Richard Nixon did. He was looking into his political opponents, and we all know what happened with Richard Nixon. So we'll see what happens. Do your best not to go in your respective silos. In fact, I would love for this audience, some of you, I would imagine, probably only watch Fox. Some of you probably only watch CNN. Some of you probably only watch MSNBC or read a certain newspaper or magazine. Why don't you try a little experiment and watch the other networks a couple hours a day or for the entire week? Don't watch Fox News for a week. Watch CNN, see what they say. Don't watch MSNBC. Watch Fox for a week. See if you can do it. See if you can do it. See, and be honest with yourself. See if you can even tolerate it. Because it's an interesting experiment. And see if you, wow, I didn't know that happened. Is that true? See what happens to you. And let me know what happens. Stay diversified, stay vigilant, and stay with the Capital News. I am Alex Karitis. Godspeed.